Darkness Unveiled, the Zodiac Killer. The Cipher of Evil. On a cold December night in 1968, two teenagers sat in a parked car on a quiet road just outside Vallejo, California. They never made it home. Within months, a letter arrived at 3 Bay Area newspapers. Inside, a cryptographic cipher, a boastful confession, and a chilling demand. The author didn't sign with a name. He signed with a symbol, a crosshair, and then he promised to kill again. He kept that promise. What followed was one of the most terrifying, intellectually sadistic crime sprees in American history, a cat-and-mouse game between a faceless killer and every law enforcement agency in Northern California. More than 50 years later, we still don't know who he was. We may never know. But tonight, we walk through every shadow, every cipher, every blood-soaked crime scene, and every dead end. This is the story of the Zodiac Killer. The late 1960s. America was fracturing. The Vietnam War raged overseas. The counterculture revolution was reshaping California. The summer of love had faded into something darker, more paranoid. In the San Francisco Bay Area, a region already haunted by political unrest and social upheaval, a new kind of terror was about to emerge, not from protest movements or organized crime, but from one individual operating alone, cloaked in anonymity, driven by something no detective, no psychologist, no codebreaker could fully explain. Between December 1968 and October 1969, a serial killer stalked the roads, parks, and lake shores of Northern California. He targeted young couples. He attacked without warning and without mercy. And then, in a move almost unprecedented for the time, he wrote to the press. He taunted police. He embedded his identity inside elaborate ciphers and dared the world to crack them. He called himself the Zodiac. This case sprawls across multiple jurisdictions, dozens of suspects, hundreds of leads, and thousands of pages of investigative files. It has consumed the lives of detectives, journalists, amateur sleuths, and cryptographers for over half a century. The Zodiac Killer is not simply an unsolved murder case. It is an obsession, a puzzle with no final piece, a wound that Northern California has never been able to close. Let's go back to the beginning, before the ciphers, before the letters, before the crosshair became a symbol of pure dread. To understand the Zodiac's hunting ground, you have to understand the geography and culture of the Bay Area in the late 1960s. San Francisco was the beating heart of American counterculture, but just beyond the city limits, in places like Vallejo, Benicia, Napa, and the quiet suburban stretches of Solano County, life was different, quieter, more traditional. Young couples would drive out to lovers' lanes, park near reservoirs and lakes, and spend their evenings away from the noise of the city. It was a ritual as old as the automobile itself, and it was exactly this vulnerability that the Zodiac would exploit. David Arthur Faraday was 17 years old, a Boy Scout, an Eagle Scout, in fact, one of the highest honors a young man could achieve in scouting. He was a good student at Hogan High School in Vallejo. His friends described him as kind, responsible, and earnest. He was the kind of teenager parents trusted. On the evening of December 20th, 1968, David picked up his date, 16-year-old Betty Lou Jensen, for what was supposed to be a simple night out, their first real date together. Betty Lou was a bright, popular student at the same school, warm, well-liked, with her whole future stretching out ahead of her. They attended a Christmas concert at Hogan High that evening. Afterward, they drove to a gravel turnout on Lake Herman Road, a remote stretch of road between Vallejo and Benicia. It was a well-known lover's lane spot. Other couples parked there regularly. The road was dark, flanked by open fields and rolling hills. There were no streetlights, no houses in sight, just the hum of the engine, the quiet of the countryside, and the cold December air pressing against the car windows. They had no reason to be afraid. Why would they? This was a place they knew, a place their friends had been dozens of times before, but something was different that night. Someone was watching. Meanwhile, across the Bay Area, life hummed on. Families prepared for Christmas. Stores were crowded with holiday shoppers. No one had any reason to suspect that a predator was circling. There was no pattern yet, no warning signs, no letters, no ciphers. The name Zodiac didn't exist in anyone's vocabulary. That was about to change. What's chilling about this case is how ordinary everything was before the horror began. David and Betty Lou were not reckless teenagers engaged in risky behavior. They were two kids on a date. They did everything right. They told their parents where they were going. They had a curfew, and yet fate, or something far more deliberate than fate, had already chosen them. The question that haunts every detective who has ever worked this case is simple, and it has no satisfying answer. Why them? Was it random? Was it opportunity? Or had the Zodiac been watching, planning, selecting his victims with a precision that defied chance? We may never know. But what happened next on Lake Herman Road would set into motion a chain of events that would terrorize an entire region and redefine the American understanding of serial murder. At approximately 11:15 p.m. on December 20th, 1968, a Benicia police officer named Pierre Bidou was dispatched to Lake Herman Road after a passing motorist reported seeing two bodies near a parked car. What Bidou found at the scene was devastating. David Faraday lay on his back beside the right rear wheel of his mother's Rambler station wagon. He had been shot once in the head at close range. He was still breathing, barely, when the officer arrived. He would die before reaching the hospital. Betty Lou Jensen's body was found 28 feet away from the car, face down on the gravel. She had been shot 5 times in the back. The grouping of the shots was tight, deliberate. She had tried to run. She hadn't made it far. Reconstructing the scene, investigators determined that the shooter had approached the car from behind, possibly on foot. The evidence suggested that David was shot first, through the car window, or just as he stepped out. Betty Lou had then fled in a panic, running toward the road. The killer had calmly pursued her and fired repeatedly. 5 shots, 5 hits, in the dark, on a moving target. This was not the work of a panicked or impulsive attacker. This was controlled, methodical, practiced. But there was a problem. There were almost no clues, no fingerprints, no eyewitnesses, no apparent motive. The victims had no known enemies. Robbery was ruled out. Nothing was taken. Sexual assault was ruled out. The weapon was determined to be a .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol, but the gun was never recovered. Detectives from both the Benicia Police Department and the Solano County Sheriff's Office investigated, but the case quickly went cold. There were no surveillance cameras in 1968, no DNA analysis, no cell phone records to trace. The forensic tools we take for granted today simply didn't exist. The murder of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen was filed as an open investigation, and life, reluctantly, painfully, moved on. 6 months passed. Then it happened again. On July 4th, 1969, just before midnight, 22-year-old Darlene Ferrin and 19-year-old Michael Mageau were parked at Blue Rock Springs Park, another well-known lover's lane spot in Vallejo, less than 4 miles from the Lake Herman Road crime scene. A car pulled up beside them. A man got out. Without a word, he approached the passenger side and opened fire with a 9mm handgun, spraying the interior of the car with bullets. Mageau was hit multiple times, but survived. Darlene Ferrin was struck 9 times. She died at the hospital. The shooter drove away. Then, approximately 40 minutes later, he called the Vallejo Police Department from a payphone. His voice was flat, emotionless. He said, "I want to report a double murder. If you will go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway to the public park, you will find kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." He had just connected the 2 attacks. He had just claimed responsibility for both. And he had just confirmed something terrifying. This was not a one-time act. This was a campaign. The darkness had a voice now, and it was about to start writing. On August 1st, 1969, 3 newspapers in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald, each received a nearly identical handwritten letter. The letters were chilling in their arrogance. The author claimed responsibility for the shootings at Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs Park, providing details that only the killer, or someone intimately familiar with the crime scenes, could have known. He described the ammunition he used. He described the positions of the victims. He left no room for doubt, but the letters came with something else, something unprecedented. Each letter contained 1/3 of a 408-symbol cryptographic cipher. The author demanded that all 3 newspapers publish their portion of the cipher on the front page. If they didn't, he warned, he would go on a killing rampage, slaughtering 12 people over the following weekend. He signed the letters not with a name, but with the now iconic crosshair symbol, a circle divided by a cross. The newspapers published the ciphers. The public was terrified. And now, for the first time, the case had a name. The killer would soon provide it himself. The 408 cipher was cracked within a week, not by the FBI, not by the CIA, not by any government agency, but by a high school teacher named Donald Hardin and his wife Betty from Salinas, California. The decoded message was horrifying. I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part of it is that when I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and all the people I have killed will become my slaves. The message was deranged, it was grandiose, and yet, critically, it did not reveal the killer's identity. The final 18 characters of the cipher appeared to contain his name, but they have never been conclusively decoded. Some believe they were deliberately scrambled. A final taunt, a locked door with no key. On August 7, 1969, another letter arrived at the San Francisco Examiner. This one began with 3 words that would echo through American criminal history. Dear editor, this is the Zodiac speaking. He now had a name, a brand, an identity crafted not by the police or the press, but by the killer himself. Detectives across multiple jurisdictions scrambled to coordinate, but coordination was exactly what they couldn't achieve. The Lake Herman Road murders fell under Benicia PD and Solano County jurisdiction. Blue Rock Springs was Vallejo PD. Future attacks would involve the Napa County Sheriff's Office and the San Francisco Police Department. Each agency had its own detectives, its own evidence protocols, its own chain of command. In an era before centralized databases, before VICAP, before the concept of a multi-jurisdictional task force was standard practice, the Zodiac investigation was fractured from the start. And then, while detectives argued over jurisdiction and evidence sharing, the Zodiac struck again. This time, he changed his method. This time, he wanted to look his victims in the eyes. September 27, 1969, Lake Berryessa, Napa County. A place of stunning natural beauty, oak-dotted hills rolling down to a vast man-made reservoir, popular with hikers, fishermen, and college students looking for a quiet afternoon. Brian Hartnell, 20, and Cecilia Shepard, 22, were students at Pacific Union College, a Seventh-day Adventist school in nearby Angwin. They were spending the afternoon relaxing on a blanket near the lake's edge, enjoying the warm September sunshine. At approximately 6:30 p.m., a figure appeared from behind a tree roughly 30 yards away. He was stocky. He wore a dark hooded costume with a bib-like front panel that displayed the Zodiac's crosshair symbol sewn or painted onto the fabric. He carried a handgun in one hand and a long knife in the other. Clip-on sunglasses covered his eyes beneath the hood. He approached the couple calmly. He told them he was an escaped convict from a prison in Colorado. He said he needed their car and money. He instructed Cecilia to tie Brian's hands behind his back with pre-cut lengths of clothesline. Then the man tied Cecilia himself. And then, without warning, without provocation, without a single word of explanation, he began stabbing them. Brian Hartnell was stabbed 6 times in the back. He survived, though the wounds were grievous. Cecilia Shepard was stabbed 10 times, in the back and the chest. She clung to life for 2 agonizing days before succumbing to her injuries at Queen of the Valley Hospital in Napa on September 29th. After the attack, the Zodiac walked to Brian's white Volkswagen Karmann Ghia and, using a black felt-tip pen, wrote on the car door. He inscribed the dates and locations of his previous attacks, ending with Sept 27 and 69, 6:30 by knife. Then, as he had done before, he called the police. From a payphone at a car wash in downtown Napa, he reported the crime in the same flat, emotionless voice. I want to report a murder. No, a double murder. They are 2 miles north of park headquarters. They were in a white Volkswagen Karmann Ghia. When the dispatcher asked for his identity, the line went dead. This attack was different from the shootings. It was intimate, personal. The costume suggested premeditation on a theatrical level. This wasn't just murder, it was performance. The Zodiac wanted to be seen. He wanted his victims to know who was ending their lives. He wanted the symbol on his chest to be the last thing they saw. But the theatrical nature of the Lake Berryessa attack also meant more evidence. Footprints were found near the scene. military-style boot prints, later identified as wing-walker boots, a brand commonly sold at military surplus stores. Brian Hartnell survived and provided a physical description, however limited by the disguise. The handwriting on the car door matched previous Zodiac communications. The phone call was traced to a specific payphone. For the first time, detectives had a geography of movement, crime scene to car to payphone, measured in minutes. And yet, despite all of this, the Zodiac remained invisible. How does a man in a homemade executioner's costume covered in his victim's blood walk through a populated area, make a phone call, and vanish without a single witness identifying him? 2 weeks later, October 11th, 1969, San Francisco. Paul Stine was a 29-year-old cab driver working for Yellow Cab. He was a graduate student in English at San Francisco State University, driving a cab to pay his way through school. Just before 10 p.m., he picked up a fare in the theater district. The passenger directed him to an intersection in the Presidio Heights neighborhood, one of the wealthiest, quietest residential areas in the city. At the corner of Washington and Cherry Streets, the passenger shot Paul Stine once in the right side of the head with a 9mm handgun. Then, in a move that still baffles investigators, the killer didn't flee immediately. He reached over, tore a large section of Stine's shirt, and wiped down portions of the cab, presumably to eliminate fingerprints. He also took Stine's wallet and car keys. Then he walked away. But this time, there were witnesses. 3 teenagers in a house across the street saw the aftermath. They saw a white male, approximately 5'8" to 5'10", stocky build, crew-cut or short reddish-brown hair, possibly wearing glasses, leaning over the driver's body. They called the police. A patrol unit was dispatched immediately. And here is where the case reaches its most agonizing moment of what if. Officers Donald Fook and Eric Zelms of the SFPD were en route to the scene when they passed a white male walking along Jackson Street, just 1 block north of the crime scene. Due to a dispatch error, the suspect had been initially described as a black male. The officers did not stop him. They continued to the crime scene. By the time the description was corrected, the man had vanished into the darkness of the Presidio, the massive military park adjacent to the neighborhood. Think about that. Let it sink in. 2 police officers may have driven within feet of the Zodiac Killer, a man who had murdered at least 5 people, and kept driving. Because of a radio miscommunication, Officer Fook would later state that he did get a good look at the man's face. That description, white male, early 40s, stocky, crew-cut, glasses, became the basis for the famous Zodiac composite sketch that would be plastered across newspapers, television screens, and wanted posters throughout Northern California. The murder of Paul Stine was a turning point. For the first time, the Zodiac had killed in San Francisco proper, not on a remote road, not at a secluded lake, but in a residential neighborhood in the heart of a major American city. The brazenness was staggering, and to prove it was him, the Zodiac mailed another letter to the San Francisco Chronicle, enclosing a swatch of Paul Stine's blood-soaked shirt. "I am the murderer of the taxi driver over by Washington Saint and Maple Saint last night. To prove here is a blood-stained piece of his shirt," the letter read. He then threatened to shoot children on a school bus. "School children make nice targets. I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning. Just shoot out the front tire and then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out." San Francisco erupted in panic. Armed officers were placed on school buses. Parents drove their children to school in terror. The entire Bay Area held its breath, waiting for the next attack, the next letter, the next cipher. But something unexpected happened. The confirmed killings stopped. The Zodiac continued writing letters through at least 1974, each one dripping with mockery, cryptic threats, and boastful claims. He sent a new cipher, the 340 cipher, which resisted all attempts at decryption for 51 years until a team of codebreakers finally cracked it in December 2020. Its message was taunting, but once again contained no name. "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber because it will send me to paradise all the sooner." He claimed to have killed as many as 37 people. Investigators have only definitively linked him to 5 murders and 2 survivors. The true number may never be known. Over the decades, the list of suspects grew long and controversial. Arthur Lee Allen, a convicted sex offender from Vallejo, was the most prominent suspect for years. Circumstantial evidence pointed in his direction. but DNA and fingerprint comparisons failed to confirm a match. He died in 1992 without ever being charged. Rick Marshall, Lawrence Kane, Ross Sullivan, Earl Van Best Jr., Gary Francis Post, name after name was put forward by detectives, journalists, and amateur investigators. None were ever conclusively proven to be the Zodiac. In 2007, the San Francisco Police Department reopened the case with modern forensic tools, including advanced DNA analysis. In 2018, investigators submitted evidence for genealogical DNA testing, the same technique that identified the Golden State Killer. As of this recording, no arrest has been made. The case remains officially open across multiple jurisdictions. The Zodiac Killer was never caught, never identified, never brought to justice. If still alive, he would be in his late 80s or 90s. Statistically, most investigators believe he is dead, but without a name, without confirmation, the case exists in a permanent state of suspense, a sentence without a period. The Zodiac case changed everything. It accelerated the development of criminal profiling. It exposed the critical weaknesses of fragmented, multi-jurisdictional investigations. It forced law enforcement agencies to rethink how they shared information across county and city lines. And it introduced the American public to a terrifying new archetype, the killer who doesn't just murder, but communicates. The killer who wants an audience. The killer who sees himself not as a criminal, but as a character in his own story. In many ways, the Zodiac was the first modern serial killer, not because of his methods, but because of his relationship with the media. He understood spectacle. He understood fear as a weapon that extends far beyond the crime scene. Every letter, every cipher, every taunt was designed to amplify terror, to make an entire population feel hunted. 5 confirmed dead. 2 survivors scarred for life. Dozens of ciphers, letters, and clues. Hundreds of suspects investigated. Thousands of tips received. And still, nothing. No name. No face behind the composite sketch. No conviction. No closure. So I leave you with the question that has haunted Northern California for over 50 years. The question that keeps detectives awake at night, that drives amateur codebreakers to spend their weekends hunched over symbol charts, that makes this case the most magnetic unsolved mystery in American criminal history. Who was the Zodiac? And if the answer is out there, buried in a cipher, hidden in a letter, locked inside a name we already know, why hasn't anyone found it yet? Leave your theories in the comments. And if you're new here, subscribe to Darkness Unveiled, because some cases don't end when the video does. They follow you home.